In 1977,
What the hell is this?
Imagine this. In a sleepy Arkansas town, a pastor and his little girl vanish one foggy night in 1977, leaving behind whispers of betrayal and buried sins. For 27 years, the truth festers in the shadows of an old church embezzlement, murder, and a curse that awakens vengeful ghosts. What if one widow's relentless dig unearths not just bones, but a web of lies that could shatter faith forever? Stick around to the end, you won't believe the twists that expose the darkness lurking in holy places. Disclaimer: this story is fictional, reconstructed from real cold cases for educational and entertainment purposes only. The autumn wind whipped through the dense canopy of the Ouachita National Forest, carrying the sharp scent of pine and damp earth. Deep in the southwest corner, where the ancient oaks twisted like forgotten secrets, a logger named Jack Harlan swung his chainsaw with practiced ease. He was clearing a fallen tree, its roots exposed after a heavy rain that had turned the ground into a muddy slurry. The blade bit into the wood, sending chips flying, but then it hit something unnatural, something buried deep beneath the tangled roots. Jack killed the engine, wiping sweat from his brow with a gloved hand. "What the heck is that?" he muttered to himself, his voice swallowed by the eerie silence of the forest. He knelt down, digging with his hands, pulling away clumps of soil that clung like reluctant ghosts. About 3 feet down, his fingers brushed against faded Fabrica-gray duffel bag, frayed and caked in dirt, as if the earth itself had tried to swallow it whole. The zipper was rusted shut, but he forced it open with a grunt. Inside, the stench hit him first, a choking mix of mold, decay, and something metallic that made his stomach churn. Clerical robes, black and stiff with age, lay folded neatly, an embroidered cross on the collar still visible through the grime. Next to them, a Bible, its leather cover warped and damp, with the name Elijah Freeman etched into the front page. And then, tucked in the corner, a rag doll with a red dress, yarn hair matted and stained, one eye missing like it had witnessed horrors it couldn't forget. Jack staggered back, his heart pounding in his chest. "Smells like death itself," he whispered, fumbling for his radio. He called it in to the Crawford County Sheriff's Department, his voice shaky as he described the find. Little did he know, this buried relic would shatter the quiet facade of a small Arkansas town, unraveling a web of lies that had festered for nearly 3 decades. The phone rang in Sarah Freeman's kitchen, an old rotary model that hadn't buzzed in weeks. It was a crisp October morning in Eldridge, Arkansas, the kind where the sun filtered through the maple leaves like golden fingers, but Sarah felt none of its warmth. At 63, she moved slowly, her once vibrant frame now hunched from years of unspoken grief. The clapboard house on the northern edge of town creaked with every step she took, its shingles worn thin, walls patched with faded paint that peeled like old memories. She poured coffee from a percolator into a chipped mug, steam rising in lazy curls. On the shelf nearby sat a framed photo Elijah on the pulpit, his arm around their smiling daughter Grace, her pigtails tied with ribbons. Sarah stared at it for a moment, her eyes distant, before the ringing pulled her back. She hesitated, then picked up the receiver. "Mrs. Sarah Freeman?" The voice on the other end was deep and measured, belonging to Sergeant Ronald Gale. "This is the Crawford County Sheriff's Department. We need to talk about something we found in the forest." Sarah's grip tightened on the phone. "Speaking," she said cautiously, her Arkansas drawl soft but edged with wariness. Gale cleared his throat. A forestry crew uncovered an old duffel bag buried under a dead oak tree in the Ouachita National Forest. Inside were clerical robes, a Bible, and a rag doll. The Bible has the name Elijah Freeman inscribed on it. "Does that ring any bells, ma'am?" The room seemed to tilt. Sarah froze, the air thinning around her. Her mind raced back to that fateful autumn night in 1977, when her husband, Reverend Elijah Freeman, and their little girl Grace vanished without a trace. The police had called it a runaway, an accident, a lost cause. The church whispered of a spiritual crisis, but Sarah had never believed it. Elijah was no coward. He would never have taken Grace and left her in the dark. "Describe the doll," she demanded, her voice trembling but firm. "It's got a red dress, yarn hair kinda stained with age. One eye's gone." Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. "Clara." Grace's beloved rag doll, the one she clutched even in sleep, with those long arms and that bright red fabric. It had disappeared with them, never to be seen again. "That's my daughter's," she whispered. "How deep was it buried? Who would do something like that?" Gail paused. "About 3 feet, ma'am, buried pretty deliberate-like. We'd like you to come down to the station and identify the items, if you can." She didn't answer right away. The echoes of the past flooded in Elijah's booming sermons in the sanctuary, Grace's giggles as she chased fireflies in the backyard. Sarah hung up, her coffee, forgotten, and grabbed her keys. The drive to the station was a blur, her old pickup truck rattling over the red dirt roads that wound through the ancient maples. At the sheriff's department, a squat brick building in the heart of Eldridge, Sergeant Gale waited in a cramped office cluttered with files and coffee stains. He was a burly man in his 50s, hat pulled low, his face etched with the weariness of small-town law enforcement. "Thanks for coming so quick, Mrs. Freeman," he said, nodding her to a chair. He spread out photos on the desk, grainy shots of the duffel bag, the robes, the Bible, and Clara. Sarah leaned forward, her fingertips trembling as she touched the image of the doll. "That's Clara, all right." Grace never let go of her, not even for bedtime stories. Her voice cracked, but she pushed on. "The Bible, Elijah's handwriting?" Gail nodded, flipping to a close-up. "Name's clear as day, and there's a note inside, faded but legible. God sees the shadows in his house." "Mean anything to you?" Sarah's breath caught. Shadows in his house. Elijah had always preached about light-piercing darkness, but this felt like a warning, a cryptic message from beyond the grave. It wasn't just a random burial. Someone had hidden these items with purpose, perhaps leaving a trail for the right eyes to follow. She sat back, her mind whirling. "This ain't no accident, Sergeant. My husband and daughter didn't just up and vanish. Someone made them disappear." Gale made a note in his pad. "We're securing the site, but the case is old, 27 years cold. Files are dusty, some missing. We'll look into it, but don't get your hopes up too high." Sarah's eyes sharpened. "Hopes? I've been living without 'em for decades. But this is the first real clue since that night. You call it cold, I call it buried alive." She left the station with copies of the photos tucked in her purse, her heart pounding with a mix of dread and determination. The forest was over 10 miles southwest of town, far from Mount Olive Baptist Church, where Elijah had preached. Why there? Why bury instead of burn? Questions gnawed at her like unseen insects in the dark. Back home, the house felt heavier, the shadows longer as the afternoon sun dipped low. Sarah spread the photos on her kitchen table, the yellow light from the bulb overhead, casting eerie glows. She opened an old drawer, pulling out a yellowed map of the local area, marking the spot with a pencil. Clear where it begins. That night, sleep evaded her. She sat by the window, staring into the backyard where Grace used to play hopscotch on the cracked concrete. Memories pricked like needles. Elijah's voice reading bedtime stories, Grace's tiny hand in hers. "If you can't find light in the church, carry your own lamp," Elijah used to say. Sarah had let hers flicker out long ago, but now, a spark ignited. The next morning, she packed a small bag, the map, Elijah's old notebooks, and Grace's silver locket. Before leaving, she paused at the family photo, her hand on Elijah's face. "We'll find out," she whispered. The door clicked shut behind her, and the engine of her pickup roared to life in the dim light. She drove to the edge of the forest trail, where yellow police tape fluttered like warning flags under the canopy. Sunlight struggled through the leaves, making the woods feel heavy, secretive as if the trees themselves guarded truths they didn't want disturbed. Sarah stepped out, bag slung over her shoulder, her steps hesitant but driven by something fiercer than fear. Sergeant Gale approached, adjusting his hat. "Glad you made it. We've kept everything in place." Her eyes fixed on the disturbed earth. The oak was dead, its trunk hollow, bark peeling like skin from a corpse. "How deep again?" she asked. 3 feet or so. Logger nearly missed it after the rain loosened the roots. Sarah crouched by the hole, the duffel now on a tarp nearby. She touched the Bible gently, turning the pages. Under the moldy paper, Elijah's handwriting emerged. God sees the shadows in his house. I cannot be silent any longer. A chill ran down her spine. When had he written this? It wasn't a sermon note. It was a confession, a plea. This is evidence, she said softly. Not just stuff buried random like. Gail shrugged. Maybe, but the case is ancient. Not everyone wants to stir up old ghosts. Sarah stood, scanning the wilderness, no trails, far from roads. Someone had chosen this spot to hide, but why leave a message? She photographed everything, noting details in her notebook. On the drive back, questions swirled, buried deep, but not destroyed. A sign for her? That evening, she pored over the photos at home, rewriting Elijah's words until they burned into her mind. Then, from the filing cabinet, she pulled old paper copies of the 1977 investigation, witnesses' statements, asset lists. Elijah's personal diary was missing from the inventory, an odd gap. Outside, the night wind rustled the trees, whispering reminders that the past lurked, waiting. Sarah underlined a note, no personal belongings found, or taken before. Her fear shifted to resolve. If they won't reopen it, I'll do it myself, she mumbled. She marked the map with a red dot, the real starting point. As she turned off the lights, a dream came out of loss, but Elijah in the forest, pointing the way. Sarah woke with purpose, outlining details in her notebook, bag location, photos, Elijah's notes. Questions in red ink. Why buried? Who saw him last? Who had the office key? She headed to Mount Olive Baptist Church, where Elijah had served. The dirt road hadn't changed, fenced with mossy wood. The church loomed like a faded sentinel, roof tiles dull, windows dusty. Inside, Pastor Harold Gray arranged books near the pulpit. Sarah Freeman, he said warmly, heard about the bag. Sorry if it stirs pain. I never stopped hurting, Harold, she replied. Reverend George Taylor entered, smiling wide. Sarah. Long time, pity under these circumstances. I need Elijah's old office, she said. Silence. Harold glanced at George. Of course, Harold said, handing the key. The room smelled of musty paper. Sarah opened drawers, empty, then hymns, then a stuck one with expense statements from 1976 and 77. Upgrades costing 3 to 5 times normal. No invoices. This wasn't in the archives, she said. Maybe overlooked, Harold replied. George, room was storage for years. Things get misplaced. Sarah folded the papers. Elijah didn't forget. He kept it for a reason. Heavy silence. Leaving, she eyed a Christmas photo, Elijah tense, Harold and George flanking him. Back home, she compared expenses. Elijah knew, and they knew he knew. Sunset cast orange streaks. Sarah opened Elijah's box. Sermons, letters, his diary. Dated March 1977, if they refuse to repent, I will speak, cannot be silent. Numbers matched, $5,200. Harold signed, no equipment. She paced. Evidence of conspiracy. She called Carl Jennings. It's Sarah. About the bag. Meet tomorrow. Hand on the diary, she felt Elijah's presence. The path was clear. Driving to Carl's, sunlight-pierced pines. His house, tidy, maps on walls. I never believed he left, Carl said. They pulled me off for restructuring. File, photo of Elijah with Harold, George, tense faces. Grave plot 17, no records, buried days after. You think it's not a dog's grave? Sarah asked. Carl nodded, chilling suspicion. They planned. But as she left, a branch snapped. Someone watching? At home, envelope under door, map to cemetery, dig here. Heart pounding, she whispered, who's helping? A knock echoed loud, insistent. Who was at the door in the dead of night? The thin morning light filtered through the pine trees as Sarah Freeman drove her old pickup truck along the winding dirt road out of Eldridge. The tension simmered in her chest like a pot about to boil over, her hands gripping the wheel tight enough to turn her knuckles white. She had outlined every chilling detail from the night before the bag's location in the forest, the photos of Elijah's Bible with that eerie inscription, and the questions she had underlined in red ink like bloodstains on paper. Why buried so deep? Who last saw Elijah that fateful night? Who held the key to his office when everything went dark? She was headed to Carl Jennings's place, a secluded one-story wooden house tucked between two small hills behind a thick stand of oaks. Carl was the only former investigator who had ever treated Elijah's disappearance as something shady, not just a pastor skipping town with his kid. He had been yanked off the case after 3 weeks, shoved aside for what they called personnel restructuring. Sarah remembered him well from 1977, a tall man with sharp eyes, asking questions that cut deep, recording every whisper. But then he vanished from the investigation, like someone had pulled strings from the shadows. The house came into view, tidy but isolated, surrounded by a wooden fence and a garden kept neat with rows of tomatoes and beans. It struck Sarah that Carl lived like he was still on the job, cut off from the town that had turned its back on him. She parked and knocked, the sound echoing in the quiet morning air. After a moment, the door creaked open. Carl stood there, 65 years old now, his gray hair cropped short, wearing a simple shirt and faded jeans. He looked at her for a long beat, as if sizing up whether she was real or just another ghost from the past. "I figured you'd show up sooner or later," he said, his voice hoarse from years of cigarettes and regrets. "Come on in, Sarah. Coffee's hot." She stepped inside, the living room arranged like a makeshift detective's den, maps pinned to the walls, drawers stuffed with yellowed files, bookshelves groaning under the weight of old case documents. A large table in the corner held papers in careful stacks, not chaos, but intentional order, like clues waiting to connect. Carl poured her a mug of black coffee, strong and bitter, the kind folks in Arkansas drank to shake off the fog. "I never bought that story about Elijah running off," he said, sitting across from her. "A man like him, devoted to his flock, to you and little Grace? Nah, and I sure as heck never forgot the fire in your eyes back then. A wife who knows her husband didn't leave, that's the kind of gut feeling that sticks." Sarah sipped the coffee, its heat grounding her. "They said you got too emotional, not objective enough. But a wife's instinct is sharper than any badge, Carl. I brought what you need to see." She opened her bag, sliding across copies of the photos from the forest find, Elijah's diary page with the damning words about silence, and the expense statements she had unearthed from the church office. Carl read silently, his eyes hardening as he reached the line. "If they refuse to repent, I will speak before the congregation. I cannot be silent in the face of wrongdoing." He scanned it again, then looked up at Sarah, his voice low and gravelly. He knew something rotten, all right. And he was gearing up to blow the whistle. "This matches what I suspected back in the day, embezzlement, maybe worse." Sarah nodded, leaning forward. "I found those financial notes in his old desk at the church. Harold signed off on $5,200 for sound upgrades, but no equipment ever showed up. No receipts, no nothing. Elijah tracked it, and then poof, he's gone, along with Grace." Carl stood, unlocking a metal filing cabinet in the corner. He pulled out a thick folder labeled Freeman Unresolved. "This is my copy of the original file, the one I squirreled away before they booted me. Some of this stuff ain't in the official archives any more convenient, huh?" He spread the pages, initial statements from parishioners, a map of the church grounds, Elijah's schedule from his final days. What caught Sarah's eye was a black and white photo, never published. It showed Elijah standing with Harold and George on October 10th, 1977, just 3 days before the vanishing. Elijah's face was tense, his smile forced, eyes darting off frame like he sensed danger lurking. Harold had a hand on Elijah's shoulder, friendly on the surface but gripping too tight, controlling. George grinned wide, but his gaze avoided the camera, shifty as a fox in a henhouse. "This photo didn't make the official report," Carl said, tapping it. "I got it from a parishioner's personal stash. A week after Elijah disappeared, that family packed up and left town overnight. No forwarding address, no goodbye. You think they were threatened? Sarah's skin prickled with a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air, or paid off. Folks don't just vanish unless someone's pulling strings. She traced the photo with her finger, feeling the weight of unspoken secrets pressing down. Carl unfolded a map of the Mount Olive Church Cemetery, yellowed but marked with a red circle in one corner, plot number 17. Marked as a dog's grave for some parishioner named Trenton, but no burial records, no caretaker, nobody visits. Buried 2 days after Elijah went missing. I always figured it wasn't Fido down there. The words hung heavy, a horrifying possibility that made Sarah's stomach twist. Buried like a pet, forgotten in hallowed ground. You think Grace or Elijah? Her voice trailed off, too raw to finish. Carl met her eyes, his own shadowed with regret. I don't want to guess, not with you, but with that bag turning up 10 miles away, buried deliberate like, it fits a pattern. Hide the evidence in plain sight, scatter the rest. They talked for hours, piecing together fragments. Carl admitted a layer of his own guilt back then. He had taken a small bribe, $500 slipped under the table by someone from the church, to look the other way on minor details. It ate at me, he confessed, his voice cracking. I should have fought harder, but those church folks, they got ways to make you shut up, twist your arm with talk of faith and community. Sarah stared at him, betrayal flickering, but she saw the remorse etched deep. We all got demons, Carl. But you're helping now. That's what counts. As she left, the sun climbed higher, but the forest around Carl's place felt denser, more watchful. Branches snapped in the wind, or was it footsteps? She shook it off, driving back to town with the files clutched close. That afternoon, Sarah returned to Mount Olive Baptist Church, the faded white building standing alone in a wide field like a sentinel guarding forbidden truths. The air inside was cool and musty, carrying the faint scent of hymnals and polished wood. Harold was there, arranging prayer books, his tall frame in a light gray suit, dignified as ever. George hovered nearby, his energetic smile masking restless eyes that darted like they couldn't settle. Sarah, Harold said softly. Back so soon? I hope you're finding peace. Peace? Not yet, she replied, her tone steady but laced with steel. I need another look around, if you don't mind. George chuckled nervously. Why poke at old wounds? Elijah's in a better place now, you know. She ignored him, heading to Elijah's old office. The room felt colder this time, shadows clinging to the corners like unspoken accusations. She rifled through drawers again, but her real aim was the basement door at the end of the hallway locked tight, as always. As she stood there, a faint sound echoed from below, a child's cry, muffled and distant, like Grace calling out in a nightmare. Sarah froze, her heart pounding wildly. Was it the wind? Or something more sinister lurking in the dark depths? She pressed her ear to the door, the wood cool against her skin, but the cry faded, leaving only eerie silence. Harold appeared behind her. That's just the pipes, Sarah. Old building like this creaks and moans. But his eyes avoided hers, and George's whistle from the hall sounded forced, too casual. Sarah turned, facing them. Elijah wrote about shadows in God's house. What was he silent about, Harold? The money? The missing funds? Harold's face remained calm, but a vein pulsed in his neck. You're grasping at straws, stirring up pain for nothing. George interjected, his voice higher pitched. Yeah, why dig up old dirt? Elijah had his own troubles, personal stuff. Maybe that's why he left. Sarah's gaze bored into George. Left? With Grace's doll buried in the woods? That ain't leaving, that's hiding a crime. She pulled out the expense notes. These match Elijah's diary funds siphoned off, signatures that look forged. I got an expert eyeing them already. The air thickened with tension. Harold crossed his arms. Careful, Sarah. Accusations like that could tear this community apart. She pocketed the papers. Maybe it needs tearing, if it's built on lies. Leaving the church, the wind whipped up, carrying a chill that seeped into her bones. Back home, Sarah spread everything on the table. The diary, the notes, Carl's photo. She compared the signatures heralds on the expenses leaned wrong, shaky, not his usual decisive stroke, forged, clear as day. Elijah knew, she whispered. And they knew he knew. As dusk fell, she heard a rustle outside. Peeking through the curtains, she saw nothing but shadows dancing in the yard. Then, under the door, a thin envelope slid in, plain and unmarked. Heart racing, she picked it up, tearing it open. Inside, a note scrawled in shaky blue ink. Stop digging, or you'll join them, and tucked beside it, a small lock of red yarn hair, stained with age, just like Clara's. Sarah's hands trembled, the room spinning. Who was watching her? And how close were they lurking in the dark? The envelope trembled in Sarah Freeman's hands like a living thing, its contents spilling out secrets that chilled her to the bone. The note's words burned into her mind. Stop digging, or you will join them. And that lock of red yarn hair, frayed and faded, sent a jolt through her like ice water in her veins. It was from Clara, no doubt Grace's doll, buried and unearthed, now taunting her from the grave. Sarah backed away from the door, her breath coming in short gasps, the room's shadows stretching long and menacing under the dim lamplight. She locked every bolt, checked the windows twice, but sleep was a distant stranger that night. Visions plagued her, Elijah's face in the forest, Grace's cry echoing from the church basement. By morning, resolve hardened her fear into action. She called Carl first thing, her voice steady despite the knot in her gut. Someone slipped a thread under my door last night, she said, skipping pleasantries, note and a piece of Clara's hair. They're watching me, Carl. A pause on the line, then Carl's gravelly tone. Darn it, Sarah, get over here now. We need to move fast before they shut us down for good. She drove to his cabin, the Arkansas sun climbing high, but offering no warmth. Carl waited on the porch, a shotgun leaning against the rail settle, but a clear sign he felt the danger lurking too. Inside, they spread the note on the table alongside the files. This yarn matches the doll, Carl said, examining it under a magnifying glass. Someone's playing games, trying to scare you off. But it backfired, proves we're onto something real. Sarah nodded, her mind racing. The church is at the heart of it. Harold and George, they know more than they're letting on. Elijah's diary points straight to embezzlement, and those forged signatures scream cover-up. Carl pulled out his handwriting analysis notes. He had sent samples to an old buddy, a forensic expert in Little Rock, who ran tests overnight. Expert says 80% chance those signatures on the expense vouchers are fakes. Ink density off, stroke pressure, doesn't match Harold's usual hand. It's sloppy work, like they rushed it after Elijah started sniffing around. The words hung heavy, unraveling threads of deception that had bound the town for decades. Sarah felt a surge of vindication mixed with dread. Proof was mounting, but so was the risk. As they plotted next steps, a knock echoed at the door, sharp and unexpected. Carl grabbed his shotgun, motioning Sarah to stay back. He cracked the door, peering out. A man stood there, mid-30s, tall with Elijah's sharp jawline and piercing eyes, but hardened by years Sarah couldn't place. He wore a worn leather jacket, jeans faded from hard living, and a baseball cap pulled low. "Can I help you?" Carl asked, voice low and wary. The stranger glanced past him at Sarah. "I'm looking for Sarah Freeman. Name's Nathan. Nathan Black, I think. I'm Elijah's son." The words hit like a thunderclap, shattering the room's tense air. Sarah stepped forward, her heart pounding wildly. "What did you just say?" Nathan shifted, uncomfortable under their stares. "Dad, Elijah never told you about me, huh? My mom was his high school sweetheart, before he met you. She got pregnant, he chose the ministry path, left her behind. I grew up hearing stories about him, the great reverend. But I know he was onto something big before he vanished. Those bastards at the church stole thousands from the funds. I want in on this. Help you dig up the truth." Sarah's world tilted. Elijah with a secret child? It felt like a betrayal stabbing deep, but looking at Nathan, she saw echoes of her husband, the same determined set to his mouth, the fire in his gaze. "How do I know you're telling the truth?" Nathan pulled out an old photo from his wallet, a young Elijah, arm around a girl who looked like Nathan's mother, dated 1968. Mom kept his letters. He sent money sometimes, quiet-like. But when he disappeared, it stopped. I figured the church had a hand in item embezzlement, cover-ups. I came to Eldridge when I heard about the bag in the forest. Let's team up. I got nothing to lose. Carl eyed him suspiciously. Convenient timing, son. What do you get out of this? Nathan shrugged. Justice for my old man, and maybe a piece of whatever's left church funds he might have stashed, but mostly answers. Sarah hesitated, layers of doubt peeling back. Elijah's past held shadows she never imagined, but if Nathan was real, he could be an ally. All right, but we do this careful. Carl's got a lead on a grave in the church cemetery plot 17, marked as a dog's but no records. We dig tonight, under cover of dark. Nathan's eyes lit. Count me in. Dad deserves better than rotting forgotten. That evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in bloody hues, Sarah visited the Southfield nursing home, 2 miles south of town. The red brick building sat quiet amid yellowing maples, a place where memories faded like autumn leaves. Ruth Ann, Elijah's former secretary, lived there now petite, principled back in the day, handling records and calls with crisp efficiency. She had quit abruptly after the disappearance, vanishing from church life like smoke. The nurse led Sarah to Ruth's room on the second floor, warning softly, "She's got early dementia, lucid some days, lost others. Go easy." Ruth sat by the window, knitting with absent eyes, gazing at the misty garden. Sarah approached slow, pulling out the old Christmas photo of Elijah and Grace. "Ruth?" "It's Sarah Freeman, Elijah's wife." The knitting stopped. Ruth's dull eyes sparked. Focusing on the photo, she reached out, trembling fingers brushing Grace's image. A choked sob escaped. Little Grace. No one listened to him. They silenced him like locking a cabinet and tossing the key down a well. Sarah's pulse quickened. She pulled out her phone, recording discreetly. "Tell me more, Ruth. Who locked what? What files?" Ruth shook her head, retreating into fog, but then clarity flashed. Elijah found fake records money vanishing into thin air. He planned to read it all before the congregation, expose the rot. Harold changed the lock on the file room that very night. I didn't get the new key. And Grace. She screamed in the hall. I heard it, but stayed put. Too scared to peek. Sarah leaned closer, the air thick with revelation. Grace's scream? You're sure? Ruth nodded, eyes wide with haunted memory. Footsteps running, then dragging. Something broke glass maybe. Then quiet, too quiet. She glanced around, whispering. Saw a shadow that night, lurking outside the church window, tall, hooded like the devil himself come calling. A shiver crawled up Sarah's spine. Shadows again, echoing Elijah's Bible note. As she thanked Ruth and stood to leave, she caught her reflection in the room's mirror. But for a split second, it wasn't her face staring back, it was Grace, eyes pleading, mouth open in a silent cry. Sarah blinked hard, the vision gone, but the eerie chill lingered, making her skin crawl. Back in her truck, she shook off the hallucination. Dementia talk, or something more? The past felt alive, whispering horrors from the edges. She met Carl and Nathan at a local diner for lunch, greasy burgers and fries, the kind that stuck to your ribs in small-town America. Over coffee, they hashed plans under the hum of ceiling fans. Nathan bit into his burger, ketchup dripping. That grave plot 17. If it's not a dog, what do we do with what we find? Carl wiped his mouth. Call an anonymous, get forensics involved. But careful, church owns the land, trespassing could bite us. Sarah pushed her plate away, appetite gone. Elijah's diary ties it all. He suspected Harold and George of siphoning funds charity money meant for the poor, pocketed instead. With Ruth's story, it's murder, not missing. Nathan's eyes darkened. Dad wrote to my mom once about church troubles. Said he couldn't stay silent. Guess that's why they silenced him. As they left the diner, Sarah felt eyes on her back, paranoia or real. Driving home, a black sedan appeared in her rear view, tailing close on the highway. She sped up, heart hammering, but it matched her pace, headlights glaring even in daylight. "Who the heck are you?" she muttered, swerving lanes. The car accelerated, bumping her bumper lightly, warning or worse. Horns blared as she veered toward the shoulder, tires screeching on asphalt. The sedan roared past, vanishing around a bend, leaving Sarah shaken on the roadside. Her hand shook on the wheel. Attempted hit and run, or scare tactic? Secrets lurked in every shadow, unraveling like frayed ropes ready to snap. Night fell heavy over Eldridge, the moon a sliver peeking through gray clouds. Sarah, Carl, and Nathan crouched under the church cemetery fence, tools and hand shovels, flashlights dimmed low. The air hummed with crickets, but an unnatural quiet pressed in, as if the graves held their breath. Plot 17 lay in the southwest corner, grass ankle-high, untended. 2 headstones hid in bushes, one marked Buddy, 1975 to 77. The other blank, just a stone slab like a nameless accusation. "This is it," Carl whispered, probing the soil. It gave easy, loose, as if recently disturbed, not the packed earth of decades. Nathan dug first, muscles straining. "If Grace is down here, God help us." Sarah joined, dirt flying in frantic scoops, sweat beaded despite the chill, her mind flashing to Ruth's words, screams, dragging, shadows. At 2 feet down, the shovel hit something soft, yielding. They cleared carefully a small cloth bundle, stained and rotten. Unwrapping it revealed bones, tiny, fragilia, child's finger, perhaps, with remnants of flesh long decayed. Sarah gasped, tears welling. "Grace. My baby." Carl shone the light. "We need DNA confirmation. Experts said it'd take 3 days minimum, state labs backed up." Nathan's face paled. "This proves it. Murder, buried like trash." But as they reburied to avoid detection, a rustle came from the Willows' footsteps. They froze, lights off, hearts thundering. A figure emerged. Old Luther, the church carpenter, white beard under a baseball cap, cigarette unlit in his hand. "I know what you're doing," he said softly. "And I shouldn't butt in, but Elijah was kind. Meet me tomorrow at my woodshop. I'll spill what I saw 27 years ago." Before they could respond, he melted back into shadows. Sarah clutched the bone fragments photo on her phone, allies emerging, but threats closing in. What horrors would Luther reveal? And who else lurked, ready to strike? The next morning, Sarah's truck rumbled to Luther's woodshop behind Road 12, the smell of sawdust and oil thick in the air. Luther waited, pouring weak coffee, locking the door behind her, Carl, and Nathan. "I'm no busybody," he began, voice rough from years of dust. "But I kept quiet too long. Elijah deserved better." Sarah leaned in. "What did you see?" Luther hesitated, eyes scanning as if afraid of eavesdroppers. "Late October 1977, George called me midnight, said theft at the church, needed the basement sealed, paid cash up front. I showed, warehouse door open. George had a cart, tarp over something heavy, helped push it down the stairs. Asked what it wash, said broken pulpit. But what ain't that heavy, and why midnight?" Carl's eyes narrowed. "The basement still there?" "Locked now, used for storage. But I reckon what he hid wasn't furniture." Nathan clenched his fists. "Bodies? My dad's?" Luther shrugged. "Didn't peek. But next day, church buzzed with Elijah gone. I quit soon after, couldn't stomach it." Sarah felt pieces clicking, basement cries, dragged sounds from Ruth. "You think George killed them?" Luther poured more coffee. "Don't know. But visit old Anne at the nursing home, she might remember more, though her mind's slipping." They thanked him, minds reeling. Outside, rain pattered lightly. Sarah squeezed Elijah's diary in her bag. Intersections clear, funds, screams, burials. But as they drove, a black sedan appeared again, tailing relentless. "They're onto us," Carl muttered. Sarah floored it, highway blurring. The car closed in, lights flashing blinding. Horns screamed as it rammed her tailgate, spinning her toward the guardrail. Metal screeched, sparks flying. Sarah fought the wheel, truck skidding to a halt inches from the drop. The sedan sped off, vanishing in the downpour. Bruised but alive, she gasped. They want us dead. But why now? And what twist waited in the shadows ahead? The rain pounded relentlessly on Sarah Freeman's truck as she gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white against the worn leather. The highway blurred through sheets of water, the black sedan vanishing into the downpour like a ghost swallowed by the storm. Her heart thundered in her chest, adrenaline surging from the near miss, the screech of metal, the spin toward the guardrail. Bruised but unbroken, she pulled over at a roadside gas station, the neon sign flickering eerie red in the gloom. Carl's voice crackled over the phone she dialed with shaking hands. "You all right? That was no accident. Someone's gunning for us." Sarah swallowed hard, rain drumming on the roof like accusing fingers. "I'm fine, just rattled." "But this proves it, Carl. We're too close. Luther's story about the basement. We need to check it tonight." Nathan, in the passenger seat, nodded grimly. "Dad's blood might still be down there. Let's end this." They regrouped at Carl's cabin, the air thick with tension and the scent of wet earth. Flashlights, crowbars, glove stools for unearthing horrors long buried. As midnight approached, they drove to Mount Olive Baptist Church under cover of darkness, the building looming like a silent sentinel against the stormy sky. Sneaking through the side gate, they picked the basement lock with a tension that made every click echo like a gunshot. The door creaked open, revealing stairs descending into inky blackness. Sarah led, flashlight beam cutting through the damp air, revealing patchy walls peeling like flayed skin. The smell hit first, a choking blend of mold, rust, and something metallic, coppery, that twisted her gut. Old blood, festering in the cracks. Eerie whispers seemed to echo down here, Sarah murmured, her voice barely above a breath, heart-pounding fear gripping her throat. Carl swept his light over the cement floor, spotting dark stains near the stairs, splattered, smeared, as if from a desperate struggle. "This ain't rust. Forensic buddy of mine could test it, but I know blood when I see it." Nathan crouched, gloved fingers tracing the marks. "Grace. She screamed here, like Ruth said, dragged down, fighting." They searched deeper, flashlights revealing dusty shelves with old hymnals and boxes. In a corner, behind a rusted file cabinet, Sarah found a loose brick. Prying it free, she uncovered a small bundle, yellowed papers tied with twine. Unrolling them, her breath caught. A letter in Elijah's handwriting, dated October 12, 1977. "The church's curse from the 1800s embezzlement awakens the shadows. God sees, but men hide. If I fall silent, carry the light." Sarah's hands trembled. A curse? From the old days, maybe when the church was built on stolen land or something. Elijah believed it, tied to the missing funds. Carl nodded, face grim. Folks whisper about Mount Olive's history. Founders skimmed donations back in the Civil War era. Elijah must have dug into records, linked it to Harold and George's theft. Nathan's eyes widened, shadows awakening. "Creepy as hell." Explains the threats, the tailing. They're scared of more than just exposure. A sudden noise upstairs, footsteps. They froze, lights off, breaths held in the suffocating dark. The basement door rattled, then quieted. False alarm, or watcher lurking. They pocketed the letter, but as they climbed out, Sarah felt unseen eyes boring into her back, a chilling presence that made her skin crawl. The next day dawned gray and heavy, the storm's remnants dripping from the maples. Sarah confronted Harold at the church, alone this time, her resolve steeled despite the dread gnawing inside. He sat in his office, Bible open, face calm as a still pond, but his eyes flickered when she slapped the forged expense notes on the desk. "Explain this," she demanded. "Signatures faked, money vanished, $5,000 here, $3,000 there." Elijah knew, and you silenced him. Harold leaned back, crossing his arms. "Sarah, you're treading dangerous ground. Those are old papers, meaningless now." She pressed. "Meaningless? Like the blood in your basement? We found stains, DNA tests pending, but it'll match Grace. She screamed that night, dragged down." "Why, Harold? What shadows are you hiding?" his facade cracked, a vein pulsing in his temple. He stood, voice dropping to a whisper laced with pain. You want truth? Fine. I was abused as a boy, be a pastor, no less. Scarred me deep. When I took over here, the funds, I skimmed to heal those wounds, therapy, escapes. Elijah found out, threatened to expose it all before the congregation. I couldn't let that destroy me, the church. Sarah's stomach twisted, layers peeled back, victim turned villain. So you killed him? My husband? My baby girl? Harold's eyes welled, but cold. Not me, George. He panicked. Elijah confronted us that night. Grace with him, she saw too much, started crying like a banshee. George snapped, grabbed her. It escalated. Accidents happen in the heat. The words landed like blows, horrifying revelations shattering illusions. Sarah backed away, but Harold grabbed her arm. Understand, Sarah, the church needs order. Faith crumbles without it. She wrenched free. Faith? You murdered for money and secrets. God sees the shadows. You said it yourself. As she fled, George's voice called from the hall. Sarah, wait. But she didn't stop. The church's walls closing in like a tomb. Back with Carl and Nathan, she relayed the confession, voice shaking. Harold admitted the embezzlement, blamed abuse for his theft. Said George killed Grace and Panish witnessed. Carl cursed softly. Layers on layers, explains the cover-up, but we need proof solid for court. Nathan paced, fury etched. My dad threatened exposure. They silenced him. We hit the basement again, maybe more evidence. But as they planned, Nathan's phone buzzed a text from unknown. Meet alone, or she dies. He paled, hiding it quick. That night, under a moonless sky, they returned to the church basement, tension electric. Flashlights pierced the gloom, the bloodstains mocking them. Sarah swabbed samples for Carl's forensic contact report would say, blood spatter indicates struggle, dated 1977, DNA matched to Grace Freeman. Deeper in, Nathan found a hidden safe, cracking it open. Inside, ledgers showing embezzled funds, $10,000 unaccounted, signatures forged. But as Sarah reached for them, Nathan snatched the stack, bolting for the stairs. You think you're the hero, Sarah? Dad left me nothing. No money, no name. These ledgers? Worth a fortune to the right buyer. Church secrets sell high. Betrayal exploded like gunfire in the night. Sarah lunged, grabbing his jacket. Nathan, you're no son of Elijah's, we're a fraud. Carl tackled him, papers scattering. They wrestled in the dim light, fists flying, grunts echoing off walls. Nathan elbowed free, snarling, he owed me. Mom raised me alone while he played holy man. Sarah pinned a ledger under her foot. Liar. Elijah never mentioned you because you ain't real. Nathan fled up the stairs, vanishing into the night, but they salvaged most files. Panting, Sarah clutched the cursed letter. Twist after twist. He was planted to steal evidence? Carl nodded, wiping blood from his lip, likely hired by Harold. We can't trust anyone now. The forensic report came fast. Carl's contact rushed it. Blood confirmed Grace's. Struggle pattern violent, old but undeniable. Fueled by rage, Sarah drove to the dead oak tree in the forest, 1 mile from the cemetery grave they had dug before. Rain slicked the ground, mud sucking at her boots. Alone now, shovel in hand, she attacked the earth under the hollow trunk, fungus glowing pale in the flashlight beam. 4 feet deep, under 200 pounds of soil, her blade hit fabric, another bundle, reeking of decay. Unwrapping carefully, bones emerged. Adult, a skull with Elijah's distinctive jaw. And clutched in the skeletal hand, a notebook, spine scorched, pages stained with dried blood. Sarah knelt in the mud, tears mixing with rain. Turning pages under the beam, faint words appeared, scrawled in agony. I forgive them, but the truth needs to be told. Dig deeper, the shadows run far. A whisper carried on the winder from the grave? Forgive them, but dig deeper. Eerie, chilling, it wrapped around her like icy fingers. She staggered back, notebook clutched tight. Deeper. What more horrors lurked beneath? And with Nathan loose, betrayal fresh, who would strike next in the gathering dark? The notebook's blood-stained pages fluttered in the wind as Sarah Freeman knelt under the dead oak tree, rain mingling with her tears in the muddy hollow. Elijah's final words echoed in her mind like a haunting refrain. I forgive them, but the truth needs to be told. Dig deeper, the shadows run far. What deeper horrors could lurk beneath the surface of this cursed town? Her hands, caked in dirt, clutched the relic tight, but a creeping dread whispered that this was far from over. Nathan's betrayal still stung fresh, his frantic escape into the night, leaving questions swirling like the storm clouds above. She staggered to her truck, bones and notebook bundled in a tarp, the forest shadows seeming to reach out with clawed fingers. Driving back to Eldridge, headlights cutting through the fog, her phone buzzed an unknown number. She answered, voice raw. Who is this? Static crackled, then a faint whisper, childlike and eerie. Mama, why didn't you find me sooner? Grace's voice, impossible but unmistakable, sent chills racing down her spine. Sarah slammed on the brakes, truck skidding on the slick road. Grace? Baby, is that you? But the line went dead, leaving only the pounding rain in her thundering heart. Hallucination? Or something more sinister, a twisted game from those guarding the shadows? She raced to Carl's cabin, bursting through the door without knocking. He sat at the table, poring over files, but jumped up at her wild-eyed entrance. Sarah? What in tarnation? Elijah's bones, she gasped, unwrapping the bundle. Under the oak, like the map said. And his notebook bloodied, but the words. Forgive but tell the truth. Dig deeper. Carl examined the pages, face paling. This ink's faded, but handwriting matches. Forensic tests will confirm, but darn it, this is murder-proof. As they spoke, Sarah's phone rang again unknown. She hit speaker, hard in her throat. The whisper returned, the shadows, under the church. Find the money, Mama. The call cut. Carl stared. That sounded like a kid. Grace? Sarah shook her head, terror gripping her. Can't be. But it mentioned money under the church. The embezzled funds? They armed themselves Carl's old revolver. Flashlights and headed back to Mount Olive, the church's steeple piercing the night like an accusatory finger. Sneaking in through a side window, they descended to the basement once more, the air heavier now, laden with unspoken dread. Prying floorboards near the bloodstains, they uncovered a hidden compartmenta, small, safe, rusted but intact. Carl jimmied it open, revealing stacks of cash, crisp bills, totaling $10,000 by quick count, wrapped in bands marked with church logos. Stolen funds, Sarah whispered, hidden right under their noses. But as they pocketed samples, footsteps thundered above multiple, heavy. They're here, Carl hissed. They bolted up the stairs, but the door slammed shut, locked from outside. Pounding echoed, then George's voice, muffled, you should have stopped, Sarah. Now you'll join Elijah. Panic surged. Sarah rammed the door with her shoulder, wood splintering. Open up, you coward. Carl fired a warning shot through the crack, the bang exploding like thunder. The lock gave, and they burst into the sanctuary, facing George and two hired Thugs Roof men from out of town, faces shadowed under hoods. George's eyes darted, sweat beading. Nathan tipped us, said you found the bones, can't let that out. Sarah's blood boiled. Nathan your plant? Not Elijah's son at all. George swallowed. Hired him to watch you, steal evidence. But you kept digging. The thugs lunged, fists flying in the dim moonlight filtering through stained glass. Carl tackled one, grunts and crashes echoing off pews. Sarah dodged a swing, grabbing a candlestick as a weapon, swinging wild. You killed my girl. She screamed at George, who backed away trembling. It was an accident. She saw too much Elijah yelling about the money. I grabbed her. She fought, fell down the stairs. The confession shattered illusions, tensions exploding like gunfire in the night. Sarah swung the candlestick, connecting with George's arm a crack, his howl piercing. But the second thug grabbed her from behind, arm around her throat. Choking, vision blurring, she clawed at him. Carl fired again, the shot grazing the man's shoulder, loosening his grip. "Run, Sarah! They're coming!" Carl yelled, shoving her toward the door. They fled into the rainy night, forest swallowing them as George shouted, "You can't hide forever." Breath ragged, they crashed through underbrush, branches whipping like vengeful spirits. Fog thickened, disorienting, turning the woods into a maze of shadows. Sarah's lungs burned, but she pushed on, Elijah's notebook tucked safe in her jacket. Behind, footsteps pounded pursuers closing in. A shot rang out, bark splintering near her head. "Y'all think you can bury the truth? Not on my watch." Carl fired back, covering her. They reached a clearing near the cemetery, graves looming like silent witnesses. Sarah tripped over a root, sprawling in mud. Carl helped her up, but headlights pierced the Foga truck roaring toward them. "It's over," a voice boomed Harold, stepping out with a shotgun leveled. George flanked him, arm cradled, face twisted in pain. Sarah stood defiant, rain plastering her hair. "You unravel this, the whole town crumbles." Faith gone in a puff. "That's what scares you, ain't it?" Harold's eyes, cold as steel, met hers. "Faith is fragile, Sarah. Elijah threatened to shatter it, exposing my past, the abuse I suffered. I took the money to survive, but he wouldn't understand. George, to handle it." George sobbed. "I dragged her down, but Elijah fought like hell, swung at me, protected her. It got ugly, knife slipped. The twists cascaded, abuse, fueling theft, panic birthing murder. Sarah's world spun, but she drew Carl's revolver from her pocket, aiming shaky. "Why my baby girl? Tell me before I pull the trigger." Harold lowered his gun slightly, voice cracking. "She was collateral, saw us arguing, cried out. We couldn't risk her talking." Thunder rumbled, lightning illuminating the graves. Carl whispered, "Sarah, don't we got evidence? DNA from the blood, forged ledgers, Luther's testimony. Call the cops." But rage boiled. Sarah's finger tightened on the trigger. The standoff electric, every breath hanging in the balance. A siren wailed distant, growing closer. Someone tipped off. Harold's face fell. "You win this round, but shadows don't die easy." He and George bolted for the truck, tires spinning mud as they fled. Sarah lowered the gun, collapsing against Carl. "It's not over. Nathan's still out there, and that whisper on the phone." Carl nodded. "Creepy as all get out. But we got the cash, the notebook, preliminary hearing tomorrow. Prosecutors ready." The next morning, Eldridge County Courthouse buzzed with tension, a small brick building packed with locals whispering like leaves in wind. Sarah sat in the front row, files clutched, as the judge called the preliminary hearing for the Freeman case. The prosecutor laid out evidence. DNA reports confirming Grace's blood in the basement spatter consistent with violent struggle, dated 1977. Forged ledgers with expert analysis. Signatures 80% fabricated. Funds embezzled totaling over $10,000. Luther testified, voice steady. Saw George haul a heavy cart to the basement midnight after the disappearance. Too heavy for what had to be bodies. Ruth Ann, wheeled and frail but lucid, heard Grace scream, saw shadows dragging. Harold locked the files to hide the theft. Sarah took the stand, voice firm. Elijah's notebook, found with his bones, forgive but tell. He knew the corruption, died for it. But twists lurked. Nathan appeared in cuffs, arrested fleeing town. "I ain't Elijah's son," he confessed under oath. Harold hired him, paid $500 to infiltrate, steal evidence. Said the church's curse would handle the rest. The judge banged the gavel. Enough probable cause. Trial set. Bail denied for Harold Simmons and George Taylor. Outside, Sarah exhaled, but her phone buzzed unknown. The whisper, deeper, "Mama, the curse lives." Chills raced. What ancient shadow stirred? As she drove home, a black sedan reappeared in the mirror, tailing relentless through the misty roads. She swerved into the forest trail, sedan following. Fog thickened, visibility nil. The chase intensified, branches scraping like claws. "They're coming," she imagined Carl's warning. The sedan rammed her bumper, truck fishtailing. Sarah veered off-road, crashing through undergrowth toward the dead oak. Engine stalled, she grabbed the revolver, bolting into the trees. Footsteps pursued Harold. George escaped bail, panting. She hid behind a trunk, fog cloaking her. A figure emerged. George, wild-eyed, knife glinting. In this now, Sarah. The money's mine, curse or no. He lunged, blade slashing air. Sarah fired, shot echoing. George crumpling with a cry-like wound. But another shadow loomed. Harold, shotgun raised. You should have listened. The 1800s curse founders buried gold here, tainted with blood. Elijah found records, wanted to return it. I kept it, fed the shadows. Sarah aimed. Your abuse doesn't justify murder. Harold laughed bitterly. It twisted me. But Grace, that was George's panic. Now, you join her. He cocked the gun, finger tightening. Time slowed, thunder crashing. Carl burst from the fog, tackling Harold. They rolled, shotgun discharging harmlessly. Sarah helped subdue him, tying with belt. Sirens wailed, cops arriving. Harold spat, shadows will rise again. George whimpered, I dragged her. Elijah fought, knife in his gut. Buried him to hide. Confessions poured, sealing their fate. As cuffs clicked, Sarah felt release, but the whisper lingered in her mind. Back home, she spread evidence. DNA, ledgers, notebook. The phone rang unknown. She answered, steeling herself. Grace's voice. Thank you, Mama. Rest now. The line died. Hallucination? Or spirit freed? Shadows retreated, but Sarah knew digging deeper had unearthed more than bones. The trial loomed, truths ready to shatter Eldridge's facade. But as night fell, a faint knock at the door. Who lurked outside, ready for the final confrontation? The notebook's blood-stained pages fluttered in the wind as Sarah Freeman knelt under the dead oak tree, rain mingling with her tears in the muddy hollow. Elijah's final words echoed in her mind like a haunting refrain. I forgive them, but the truth needs to be told. Dig deeper, the shadows run far. What deeper horrors could lurk beneath the surface of this cursed town? Her hands, caked in dirt, clutched the relic tight, but a creeping dread whispered that this was far from over. Nathan's betrayal still stung fresh, his frantic escape into the night leaving questions swirling like the storm clouds above. She staggered to her truck, bones and notebook bundled in a tarp, the forest shadows seeming to reach out with clawed fingers. Driving back to Eldridge, headlights cutting through the fog, her phone buzzed an unknown number. She answered, voice raw. Who is this? Static crackled, then a faint whisper, childlike and eerie. Mama, why didn't you find me sooner? Grace's voice, impossible but unmistakable, sent chills racing down her spine. Sarah slammed on the brakes, truck skidding on the slick road. Grace, baby, is that you? But the line went dead, leaving only the pounding rain in her thundering heart. Hallucination? Or something more sinister? A twisted game from those guarding the shadows? She raced to Carl's cabin, bursting through the door without knocking. He sat at the table, poring over files, but jumped up at her wild-eyed entrance. Sarah? What in tarnation? Elijah's bones, she gasped, unwrapping the bundle. Under the oak, like the map said, and his notebook bloodied, but the words. Forgive, but tell the truth, dig deeper. Carl examined the pages, face paling. This ink's faded, but handwriting matches. Forensic tests will confirm, but darn it, this is murder proof. As they spoke, Sarah's phone rang again unknown. She hit speaker, heart in her throat. The whisper returned, the shadows, under the church. Find the money, Mama. The call cut. Carl stared. That sounded like a kid. Grace? Sarah shook her head, terror gripping her. Can't be. But it mentioned money under the church. The embezzled funds? They armed themselves. Carl's old revolver, flashlight sand headed back to Mount Olive, the church's steeple piercing the night like a accusatory finger. Sneaking in through a side window, they descended to the basement once more, the air heavier now, laden with unspoken dread. Prying floorboards near the bloodstains, they uncovered a hidden compartmenta, small safe, rusted but intact. Carl jimmied it open, revealing stacks of cash, crisp bills, totaling $10,000 by quick count, wrapped in bands marked with church logos. Stolen funds? Sarah whispered. Hidden right under their noses. But as they pocketed samples, footsteps thundered above multiple. Heavy. They're here, Carl hissed. They bolted up the stairs, but the door slammed shut, locked from outside. Pounding echoed, then George's voice, muffled. You should have stopped, Sarah. Now you'll join Elijah. Panic surged. Sarah rammed the door with her shoulder, wood splintering. Open up, you coward. Carl fired a warning shot through the crack, the bang exploding like thunder. The lock gave, and they burst into the sanctuary, facing George and two hired thugs roofmen from out of town, faces shadowed under hoods. George's eyes darted, sweat beading. Nathan tipped us. Said you found the bones. Can't let that out. Sarah's blood boiled. Nathan, your plant. Not Elijah's son at all. George swallowed. Hired him to watch you, steal evidence. But you kept digging. The thugs lunged, fists flying in the dim moonlight filtering through stained glass. Carl tackled one, grunts and crashes echoing off pews. Sarah dodged a swing, grabbing a candlestick as a weapon, swinging wild. You killed my girl. She screamed at George, who backed away trembling. It was an accident. She saw too much Elijah yelling about the money. I grabbed her. She fought, fell down the stairs. The confession shattered illusions, tensions exploding like gunfire in the night. Sarah swung the candlestick, connecting with George's arm a crack, his howl piercing. But the second thug grabbed her from behind, arm around her throat, choking, vision blurring. She clawed at him. Carl fired again, the shot grazing the man's shoulder, loosening his grip. Run, Sarah. They're coming. Carl yelled, shoving her toward the door. They fled into the rainy night, forest swallowing them as George shouted, You can't hide forever. Breath ragged, they crashed through underbrush, branches whipping like vengeful spirits. Fog thickened, disorienting, turning the woods into a maze of shadows. Sarah's lungs burned, but she pushed on, Elijah's notebook tucked safe in her jacket. Behind, footsteps pounded pursuers closing in. A shot rang out, bark splintering near her head. Y'all think you can bury the truth? Not on my watch, Carl fired back, covering her. They reached a clearing near the cemetery, graves looming like silent witnesses. Sarah tripped over a root, sprawling in mud. Carl helped her up, but headlights pierced the Foga truck roaring toward them. It's over. A voice boomed Harold, stepping out with a shotgun leveled. George flanked him, arm cradled, face twisted in pain. Sarah stood defiant, rain plastering her hair. You unravel this, the whole town crumbles. Faith gone in a puff. That's what scares you, ain't it? Harold's eyes, cold as steel, met hers. Faith is fragile, Sarah. Elijah threatened to shatter I'd exposing my past, the abuse I suffered. I took the money to survive, but he wouldn't understand. George, to handle it. George sobbed. I dragged her down, but Elijah fought like hell. Swung at me, protected her. It got ugly, knife slipped. The twists cascaded, abuse, fueling theft, panic birthing murder. Sarah's world spun, but she drew Carl's revolver from her pocket, aiming shaky. Why my baby girl? Tell me before I pull the trigger. Harold lowered his gun slightly, voice cracking. She was collateral. Saw us arguing. Cried out. We couldn't risk her talking. Thunder rumbled, lightning illuminating the graves. Carl whispered, Sarah, don't we got evidence? DNA from the blood, forged ledgers, Luther's testimony. Call the cops. But rage boiled. Sarah's finger tightened on the trigger, the standoff electric, every breath hanging in the balance. A siren wailed distant, growing closer. Someone tipped off. Harold's face fell. You win this round. But shadows don't die easy. He and George bolted for the truck, tires spinning mud as they fled. Sarah lowered the gun, collapsing against Carl. It's not over. Nathan's still out there, and that whisper on the phone. Carl nodded. Creepy as all get out. But we got the cash, the notebook, preliminary hearing tomorrow, prosecutors ready. The next morning, Eldridge County Courthouse buzzed with tension, a small brick building packed with locals whispering like leaves in wind. Sarah sat in the front row, files clutched, as the judge called the preliminary hearing for the Freeman case. The prosecutor laid out evidence. DNA reports confirming Grace's blood in the basement spatter, consistent with violent struggle, dated 1977. Forged ledgers with expert analysis. Signatures, 80% fabricated. Funds embezzled totaling over $10,000. Luther testified, voice steady. Saw George haul a heavy cart to the basement midnight after the disappearance. Too heavy for wood had to be bodies. Ruth Ann, wheeled and frail but lucid, heard Grace scream, saw shadows dragging. Harold locked the files to hide the theft. Sarah took the stand, voice firm. Elijah's notebook, found with his bones, forgive but tell. He knew the corruption, died for it. But twists lurked. Nathan appeared in cuffs, arrested fleeing town. I ain't Elijah's son. He confessed under oath. Harold hired me, paid $500 to infiltrate, steal evidence. Said the church's curse would handle the rest. The judge banged the gavel. Enough probable cause. Trial set. Bail denied for Harold Simmons and George Taylor. Outside, Sarah exhaled, but her phone buzzed unknown. The whisper, deeper, Mama. The curse lives. Chills raced. What ancient shadow stirred? As she drove home, a black sedan reappeared in the mirror, tailing relentless through the misty roads. She swerved into the forest trail, sedan following. Fog thickened, visibility nil, the chase intensified, branches scraping like claws. They're coming, she imagined Carl's warning. The sedan rammed her bumper, truck fishtailing. Sarah veered off-road, crashing through undergrowth toward the dead oak. Engine stalled, she grabbed the revolver, bolting into the trees. Footsteps pursued Harold. George escaped bail. Panting, she hid behind a trunk, fog cloaking her. A figure emerged. George, wild-eyed, knife glinting. In this now, Sarah. The money's mine, curse or no. He lunged, blade slashing air. Sarah fired, shot echoing. George crumpling with a crylig wound. But another shadow loomed. Harold, shotgun raised. You should have listened. The 1800s curse founders buried gold here, tainted with blood. Elijah found records, wanted to return it. I kept it, fed the shadows. Sarah aimed. Your abuse doesn't justify murder. Harold laughed bitterly. It twisted me. But Grace. That was George's panic. Now, you join her. He cocked the gun, finger tightening. Time slowed, thunder crashing. Carl burst from the fog, tackling Harold. They rolled, shotgun discharging harmlessly. Sarah helped subdue him, tying with belt. Sirens wailed, cops arriving. Harold spat. Shadows will rise again. George whimpered. I dragged her. Elijah fought, knife in his gut, buried him to hide. Confessions poured, sealing their fate. As cuffs clicked, Sarah felt release, but the whisper lingered in her mind. Back home, she spread evidence. DNA, ledgers, notebook. The phone rang unknown. She answered, steeling herself. Grace's voice. Thank you, Mama. Rest now. The line died. Hallucination? Or spirit freed? Shadows retreated, but Sarah knew digging deeper had unearthed more than bones. The trial loomed, truths ready to shatter Eldridge's facade. But as night fell, a faint knock at the door. Who lurked outside, ready for the final confrontation? The knock at the door echoed through Sarah Freeman's house, like a final accusation from the shadows that had haunted her for so long. Rain lashed the windows, the storm refusing to relent, as if the heavens themselves mourned the unraveling truths. Sarah stood frozen in her kitchen, the revolver heavy in her hand, Elijah's blood-stained notebook still clutched in the other. Who lurked outside? Harold escaped from custody, George seeking one last desperate act, or Nathan returning to finish his betrayal. She approached slowly, heart pounding with the relentless rhythm of the downpour. Peering through the peephole, she saw Carl, drenched and wild-eyed, his old black suit clinging like a second skin. Relief washed over her, but tension lingered. Sarah, open up, it's me, he shouted over the wind. She unbolted the door, pulling him inside. Carl. What happened? The cops. He shook off water like a dog, face grim but triumphant. They got him. Harold and Georgia nabbed at the state line, trying to flee in that black sedan. Nathan's confession sealed it. He spilled everything for a lighter deal. The curse, the money, the murder sits all out. Sarah sank into a chair, the weight of decades lifting slightly. Grace, Elijah. They'll get justice? Carl nodded, pouring himself coffee from the percolator. Trials fast-tracked. Evidence is ironclad. DNA from the basement blood match to Grace. Struggle patterns violent as hell. Forged ledgers showing embezzlement over $10,000. Luther's testimony about the midnight card. Ruth's about the screams. And Elijah's notebook expert confirmed the handwriting. Blood his own. Prosecutor says first-degree murder, obstruction, the works. The room felt warmer, shadows retreating under the kitchen light, but Sarah's mind whirled with the phone whispers, the eerie voice of her daughter, the curse. Harold mentioned it from the 1800s. Founders buried tainted gold, blood money from some old scandal. Elijah found records, wanted to return it. They kept it, fed the shadows. Carl sat across, eyes softening. Superstition or not, it's done. We did it, kid. Your family can rest now. Sarah managed a faint smile, tears welling. But the shadows, they're always there, Carl, whispering. He placed a hand on hers. Not anymore. Come morning, we bury them proper. Dawn broke clear, the storm's fury spent, leaving Eldridge washed clean under a crisp autumn sky. The cemetery behind Mount Olive Baptist Church, filled with townsfolk believers in suits and dresses, young families with wide eyes, even skeptics drawn by the scandal's pull. No hymns rang out. This was no ordinary service, but a reckoning. Sarah stood by the fresh graves, simple headstones etched. Elijah Freeman, beloved husband and father. Grace Freeman, our eternal light. The bones, confirmed by forensics as theirs, Elijah's from the oak, Grace's fragments from the dog's plotland pine caskets, finally at peace. Carl flanked her, hat in hand. Beautiful spot, overlooking the maples, like they wanted. She nodded, clutching Elijah's Bible, the one from the duffel, cleaned but bearing his inscription, God sees the shadows in his house. He'd like that. Preaching about light in dark places. As the pastor, a new one, Untainted, spoke softly of forgiveness and truth. Sarah felt faith stir, faint but real. No longer the hollow shell she had become, but a spark relit by relentless pursuit. After, folks approached. Luther with a nod. Ruth wheeled close, whispering thanks. Even George Taylor's sister, tears streaming, I'm sorry. He broke bad, but you brought light. Sarah embraced her. We all carry shadows, but truth sets us free. Back home, the house felt lighter, sun streaming through curtains like golden promises. Sarah spread the notebook on the table, reading Elijah's final words again. I forgive them, but the truth needs to be told. Dig deeper, the shadows run far. A chill breeze rustled papers. Dig deeper? The curse ended, or did it linger? She shook it off, but as evening fell, a thin envelope slid under the doorplane, unmarked. Heart quickening, she opened it. A single page, old and yellowed, an unfamiliar script from the 1800s. The gold buried neath the steeple, cursed by blood spilled unjust. Return it, or shadows eternal. Sarah's breath caught. Elijah had found this? The founder's secret embezzled gold from some forgotten crime, hidden under the church, fueling generations of greed. She called Carl. It's not over. The cursorial gold, buried deep. Elijah wanted it returned. His voice steady. Then we dig one last time. For him. Under moonlight, they returned to the church basement, tools in hand, the air thick with anticipation. Prying deeper under the floor where the safe had been, they hit metal chest, rusted and heavy, hauled up with grunts and sweat. Inside, gold coins, tarnished but gleaming, worth thousands by any measure. And a note, founder's confession, theft from orphan funds, blood on their hands from a rival's murder. Sarah stared. This started it all. The shadows, greed passed down. Carl whistled low. We return and donate to charity, like Elijah planned. And the curse. As they sealed the chest, a whisper echoed not from phone, but the air itself. "Thank you, Mama." Grace's voice, fading gentle. Sarah smiled through tears. Illusion or spirit? Either way, peace settled. The trial unfolded in Eldridge County Courthouse, the room packed, air humming with hushed expectation. Sarah sat third row, Carl beside, as the prosecutor built the case brick by damning brick. First-degree murder, 2 counts. The indictment read, Elijah and Grace Freeman. Embezzlement, obstruction of justice, evidence destruction. Exhibits paraded, DNA reports blood in basement matches Grace. Spatter from fatal fall. Forged documents expert analysis. Signatures fabricated, funds siphoned. Elijah's notebook written in his blood, plea for truth. Witnesses testified, Luther saw the cart bodies, no doubt. Ruth, screams that night, shadows dragging. Nathan, shackled, hired to sabotage Harold's plan. A parishioner, Arthur Hayes, saw money withdrawn, no signatures from Elijah, threatened to stay quiet. Mrs. Denice heard Grace cry. George shushed it as kids' tales. Sarah spoke last, voice clear, not for revenge, but faith. We trusted the church, but it betrayed. Elijah left truth, now we honor it. Harold sat stoic, gray suit crisp, eyes empty. George trembled, white shirt wrinkled, hands shaking. Defense argued, tragic accident, panic not premeditated. But the jury deliberated short. Guilty, the foreman announced. First-degree murder, embezzlement. Harold, life without parole. No reaction, led away like a hollow shell. George, 20 years, reduced for cooperation, sobbing as cuffs clicked. No cheers, but a collective breath released. Sarah stood, the weight gone. A month later, early winter dusted Eldridge in frost, leaves crunching underfoot. Mount Olive reopened not for sermons, but a memorial. Candlelight flickered in the sanctuary, photos of Elijah and Grace on a white-clothed table, diary and glass case. If they silence me, God will speak through others. The plaque read, the truth cannot be buried as long as one person dares to search. Townsfolk gathered, candles in hand. Sarah at the pulpit, Elijah never left us. We left him too trusting, too afraid. But truth is light, even in dark. A voice started the hymn. Let the truth be a light, even in the dark. Others joined, voices swelling. Carl whispered, we did it. Sarah nodded. Almost. Later, alone, she read the diary by lamplight, wind howling outside. A final whisper? Or just the breeze? The curse ended with truth returned, gold donated, shadows banished. But as she closed the book, a faint outline appeared on the last page, fresh ink. We may be forgotten, but always do what is kind so that they remember us with the best memories. Elijah's words, or her heart's echo? Sarah smiled. The past rested, but life pushed on. In a late autumn afternoon, in a remote town, an old woman sat reading the old diary, her hands still shaking, but her eyes still bright. Outside the window, leaves fell yellow on the yard, and somewhere between the rigid lines was the voice of the husband of yesteryear, ringing out not with sound but with presence. The story of Elijah and Grace Freeman, buried for nearly 3 decades, finally emerged into the light, a testament to persistence against silence. Drawing from real cold cases, like the murder of Irene Garza by a priest in 1960, hidden for 60 years, it underscores how institutional corruption, be it in churches or communities, thrives on blind faith. Forensic psychologist John Douglas, a former FBI profiler, notes that secrets in religious settings endure due to manipulated trust, but scientific evidence like DNA and document analysis inevitably cracks the facade. Lessons abound. Question authority relentlessly, as American churches lose an estimated $78 million yearly to embezzlement per the Evangelical Council for Financial Accountability. Support victims through therapy for post-traumatic stress disorder, remembering that truth not only liberates but heals. In the end, one person's courage can illuminate the darkest shadows, ensuring the past rests in peace.